She left me for a CEO, said I could never match her lifestyle. But the CEO blocked her overnight. She doesn't know I'm with her best friend now. If you're confused hearing that, trust me, so was I. Nothing about my life was dramatic enough to prepare me for that kind of sentence. I didn't ask for chaos, didn't chase it, didn't create it. Yet somehow I ended up in the middle of a storm I didn't even know had started until it pulled the ground out from under me. And the strangest part? Looking back, everything was already unfolding long before I realized any of it. I was just the last one to know the story I was living inside. My name is Daniel Rivers. Before everything flipped upside down, my life was simple in a way that felt safe. I lived in a small rental house on the outer edge of Cincinnati, where you can hear cars in the distance, but still feel the quiet. I liked mornings there. The cold air, the creak of the wooden gate, the smell of coffee mixing with grass. My job wasn't impressive to anyone who cared about titles maintenance technician for a local property group. I fixed boilers, replaced wiring, patched walls, made things work again. That was the part I loved. You put effort in, you fix something, and it stays fixed. People underestimate how rare that is in real life. My wife at the time, Marissa, lived in a completely different ecosystem. Her world was always polished, so curated, it sometimes felt like she was performing for an audience I couldn't see. She worked in brand strategy, building campaigns and identities, and story arcs for companies that wanted to sound more inspirational than they were. She could take a boring sentence and turn it into something that felt pulled from a motivational poster. She always talked about what was coming next promotion, next big project, next phase of her life. I used to admire that about her. I thought ambition kept her glowing. For 3 years, our life together felt quiet but predictable. I thought that was a good thing. We had routines, weeknight dinners, grocery trips, shows watched from the same couch, mornings where she'd drink her tea while scrolling through trends. We never had screaming fights. We never had icy months of silence. If anything, we drifted gently without noticing. Maybe that was the first sign. But subtle signs are the easiest ones to ignore. You don't expect your partner to be planning something behind your back when nothing seems broken. The shift happened after a single weekend. She went to Los Angeles with 2 coworkers for what she called a reset trip. Spa days, a little shopping, rooftop cocktails, nothing suspicious, nothing alarming. She'd taken trips like that before. I drove her to the airport, kissed her goodbye, and thought nothing of it. If I had known what was coming, maybe I would have asked one more question. Maybe I would have watched her expression more closely. But trust blinds you in soft ways, and I trusted her. When she came back, something about her energy was altered. Not in a big cinematic way, no dramatic makeover, no changed hairstyle. It was smaller than that, which made it feel more unsettling. She seemed jittery underneath her calm, like her thoughts were racing faster than she wanted to admit. She was glued to her phone like it was feeding her something sweet. She would smile down at her screen, then quickly hide it. She'd answer me a second too late. Not enough to accuse her of anything, but enough to plant a quiet, sinking feeling in my chest. One night she dropped a knife while cooking, and instead of laughing it off like she used to, she froze like she was waiting for a message. That's when I felt the first real chill. But the moment everything truly snapped into clarity was a Tuesday morning. I was making scrambled eggs before work, the smell of butter filling the kitchen. She walked in wearing her robe and leaned against the counter, staring at me like she was studying a stranger. There was no affection in her eyes, no warmth, just calculation. Like she was weighing something she hadn't decided whether to reveal. Then she said it. "Daniel, I think we should try an open relationship." I turned off the stove because I thought I misheard her. I waited for her to smile, to laugh, to tell me she was joking, but she wasn't. She stood there with a practiced calm, like she had rehearsed this moment in her head. "Where is this coming from?" I asked. She shrugged, one of those shrugs that tells you the decision is already made. She said she'd been reading about it, researching it, hearing how it helped couples grow individually. Then she mentioned her coworker, Brielle, the one who treated every breakup like an act of rebellion, who loved to declare monogamy as a psychological prison. Brielle, who couldn't keep a relationship longer than a houseplant. Brielle, who had spent months telling Marissa that she deserved someone on her level. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask why I wasn't enough. I placed her eggs on a plate and handed it to her. But something inside me went cold. Quiet cold. The kind that doesn't sting immediately, it just settles in your bones. Because she didn't want exploration. She wanted permission. And that's when everything became painfully clear. The very next morning she woke up cheerful, too cheerful. She asked if I'd thought about her idea. I said, "Sure, let's try it." Her face lit up with a kind of excitement that didn't belong to me. She hugged me like I was giving her freedom she'd been craving for months. She hummed while getting ready for work. She texted non-stop all day. She didn't even try to hide the glow in her eyes. She wasn't excited about us growing. She was excited because she already had someone waiting. I just didn't know who yet. Over the next few days, she left the house, dressed better than usual, wearing perfume I had never smelled before, something expensive, sharp, heavy. Her phone screen was always tilted away from me. She blamed her late returns on client dinners or brand meetings, but her explanations were too detailed, the kind of detail people use when they're trying to sound believable. Patterns that used to make sense no longer did. And once a person's routine stops making sense, everything else starts to feel wrong too. Then the truth arrived in a way I didn't expect. My sister Natalie called early one morning. She asked if she could stop by. She sounded tense, like she was holding something back. When she came over, she had that look siblings get when they know something you don't. She sat down on my couch, opened her phone, and showed me screenshots from someone connected to a woman Marissa met in LA. The messages were unmistakable. Marissa had met someone during that trip. A man named Grant Harrington. A tech CEO, wealthy, polished, the kind of guy who turned motivational nonsense into part of his identity. He flew first class everywhere, posted pictures of his watch next to windows, overlooking cities, talked like every sentence was going to end up in a book about success. He told Marissa he admired her ambition. She told someone, "If this works out, everything in my life changes." Another message said, "He can give me the future, Daniel never could." I didn't feel heartbroken reading that. I felt hollow, cold, just done. Not because she wanted someone else, because she pretended to love me while auditioning for a richer life. Betrayal doesn't always feel like a punch. Sometimes it feels like silence, heavy, suffocating silence, where you realize someone stopped choosing you long before you noticed. But instead of confronting her, I stayed quiet. I let her move the way she wanted. There's something powerful about silence. It gives people room to reveal themselves without interference. And while she drifted into her fantasy life, someone else stepped quietly into mine. Her best friend, Lena. Lena was nothing like Marissa's other friends. She wasn't loud, wasn't dramatic, wasn't obsessed with appearances. She had a grounded presence, calm, steady, observant. She'd been around for years, always supportive in a quiet way. When things started getting strange with Marissa, she didn't gossip or pry. She just watched, understanding more than she said. Then one night, right after Marissa left for another late meeting, Lena texted me, "Hey, I heard about the open relationship thing. Are you okay?" It was the first time anyone had asked me that. "Still breathing," I replied. "You don't deserve to feel replaced," she wrote back. "You're worth more than that." That sentence didn't spark romance. It just felt like someone had finally opened a window in a room I didn't realize had become suffocating. Soon she stopped by to pick up a sweater, then stayed for coffee. Then she'd drop off something Marissa left at her place. And every time, our conversations grew longer, deeper, not romantic, just human. She listened not with pity, but with understanding. She didn't try to fix anything. She just showed up. Marissa noticed immediately. "Why is Lena texting you? Did she say something about me? Are you two hanging out?" Funny how open relationships only feel open until the door swings both ways. Meanwhile, Marissa's CEO fantasy began to crack. She paced more, checked her phone obsessively, stopped smiling at her messages. And one night, when she came home later than usual, she looked shaken. He's going through a lot right now, she said, unprompted. He's under pressure. He needs space. Translation: he lost interest. He ghosted her. He moved on to the next shiny possibility. She tried to hide it, tried to act like nothing was wrong, but her panic leaked through every sentence. That's when she suddenly tried to cook dinner, candles lit, table set, music playing. It was the first romantic gesture she'd made in months. I sat down, ate quietly, and listened to her small talk. Then I said casually, "Lena told me you used to make this dish together." Her fork paused midair. Her smile twitched. Her eyes flickered with fear. She was losing control of the story she built, and she knew it. She went quiet after that dinner, like the air had been pulled out of the room. For a moment it felt like she was reaching for a script she had practiced and couldn't find her place. I remember watching her fingers drum the table, the way the candlelight caught the small scar on her knuckle, a detail I'd always loved without ever mentioning. It hit me then how much of someone you can miss when you're busy believing in the story they tell you about themselves. Her mood changed into something frantic and pleading. She started calling more, texting constellations of messages, showing up at odd hours to talk. Each attempt felt less like reconciliation and more like patching a dress that had already been set on fire. I listened to her, but the pieces she offered didn't fit together into the same life we once had. She spoke of wanting to reconnect and find us again, but she'd lost the language of choosing. Her apologies tasted like rehearsed lines. You can tell the difference between someone who's truly sorry and someone who's sorry because their options ran out. Lena, on the other hand, remained steady. She didn't grandstand. She didn't say anything dramatic. Once, when Marissa called and begged me to come over because she needed to talk, Lena leaned back in a chair and said quietly, "You don't have to go. It was the smallest thing. A few words. No theatrics, but it felt like someone handing you a life jacket in a swamp." I took it. The days moved like slow drums. Marissa's attempts to fix everything became more desperate. She tried flirting, nostalgia, guilt. She painted the house in my favorite color, as if superficial changes could stitch up years of neglect. She cried in my lap once, real tears this time, and said, "I didn't mean to hurt you. I felt something loosen inside then, but not the return of love. It was the release of the last ounce of hope I had been holding on to." One morning, Marissa came in and asked if we could talk seriously about where we were headed. I sat with my coffee while she explained, in that composed Marissa voice, how much she'd been through emotionally, how the last few months had been a wake-up call. "I want to make this work," she said. "I think we can rebuild, but it will take effort." She looked at me like she was asking me to be the scaffolding for her reconstruction. For a second, I stared at the steam curling from my mug and thought about all the times I had supported her ambitions, all the nights I came home tired and she still had energy to talk about future trends. I remembered the text screenshot Natalie showed me, the way Marissa had described Grant as a future upgrade. Maybe it was the memory of that text, or the echo of the open relationship offer, but I felt something else rise up in me. Not anger, not vindictiveness, just a blunt clarity. I loved her, or at least I had loved the idea of us. But love doesn't have to be the cost of losing yourself. You don't have to let someone practice leaving you and still expect you to applaud. So I told her plainly, I don't want a half-life. If we're rebuilding, I want honesty, not another experiment. She nodded like she understood, and then she smiled in a way that told me she already had a plan that didn't include my terms. That smile broke something quiet inside me. The divorce papers were the next step, and they were easier than I expected, not because I wanted them to be, but because she had essentially signed the map toward this alone long before she packed a bag. We had a prenup she barely remembered signing. At the paralegal's desk, I watched the man across from me slide the documents and explain plainly what it meant. "This keeps the business safe. The truck, tools, rental properties, everything premarital remains separate." He said the words casually, like listing inventory. I felt a strange relief wash over me, as though the legal language gave a finality to what my heart had already decided. There was no triumphant gloating from me, no celebrations, just a quiet, bureaucratic folding up of a life that had been leaking away for months. Marissa moved out with a few bags and a phone full of half-sent messages. She called, texted, begged, and then stopped when she realized the calls led to lawyers and signatures, not long conversations. The part that mattered most to her, the narrative where she could find another partner who would make everything better, seemed to collapse as quick as it had risen. Grant Harrington was not the man she imagined, or perhaps he was exactly that man, someone who collects people like stamps and trades them for novelty when the thrill fades. She learned, painfully and publicly, that charisma doesn't equate to commitment. After she left, friends and neighbors expected fireworks, or at least some dramatic showdown. What unfolded instead was oddly quiet. I kept showing up to work, oil-stained and calm, fixing broken things as though fixing houses could somehow mend the emptier parts of myself. Lena and I kept our mornings simple. Sometimes she would bring over coffee and sit on the porch while I filled up my truck with tools. We talked about small things, how the neighbor's dog kept stealing socks, what strain of tomato plant worked best in that corner of the yard, whether the sun had been too harsh for the new paint. Love was not every moment thunderstruck and cinematic. Sometimes it was small, steady, an accumulation of tiny attentions. Not everyone understood. Some friends whispered. Some people assumed I'd somehow orchestrated everything, as if betrayal needed a script to be believable. The internet would sculpt 1,000 caricatures out of our lives if given half the chance. But the truth was quieter and more human. I met someone who listened, who helped me feel like a person again. Lena didn't rescind her kindness when I needed it most. She didn't expect drama. She expected decent treatment and offered it back. That reciprocity had a gravity I could not resist. One afternoon, not long after the move, Marissa showed up unannounced at my sister's small backyard birthday party. She stood at the gate, carrying a cheap gift bag like it was an offering. I saw her across the lawn, hair done, shoes clacking on the path, looking as though she expected applause. People noticed. Conversations dimmed. She walked in as if the world owed her an encore. I took a breath and told her she wasn't invited. The words came out flat and final. She tried to charm her way into the circle, something about nostalgia, apologies, promises, but there is a difference between someone asking to be included and someone expecting it because they think they are owed it. Lena stood beside me, quiet and steady. When Marissa demanded to talk privately, I refused. There was no theater that night, only truth. After she left, Lena leaned in and said, quietly, "You didn't betray her, she betrayed you." Simple words, heavy relief. I remember the party resuming like nothing dramatic had happened. Neighbors laughing, my sister popping another burger, the sun sliding down the sky. The normalcy of it was comforting. It felt like the world still turned even when a marriage didn't. We settled into a rhythm that felt honest. Some nights we cooked together. Other nights, we sat in companionable silence on the porch and watched the stars come out. Words like future stopped feeling like a brand term and started to mean small, private plans. A new tool chest, a garden bed, a weekend trip to the lake. Lena's lasagna became the dish I associated with the first real night I felt like myself again. It was always warm and crisp on top, the kind of home-cooked thing that has edges and substance. There was nothing flashy about our love, and that was the point. It was a reconstruction built from the rubble of what had been, not a drama staged to punish someone. I will not pretend everything was smooth. There were awkward moments, doubt, and quiet flashes of loneliness. Sometimes I wondered if I had stooped into someone else's life, or if I'd simply grown toward something I hadn't known I needed. But slowly, the doubts thinned. Lena's presence felt less like a consolation prize, and more like a steady answer. She laughed at my terrible jokes. She told me when my work boots had grease on them, and walked with me to the truck to prove her point. Small kindnesses accumulated into a new kind of intimacy. There was a period when Marissa still attempted to worm her way back into narrative threads, texting in the early morning, leaving voicemails that began, "Can we talk?" and ended with accusations. She alternated between pleading and deriding, a strange mix of anger and regret. I never replied, not because I was cruel, but because there was nothing to say. Some relationships require words, some require boundaries. This required the latter. She reached out to Lena once, knocking on her door in the middle of an evening like a scene from a movie, but Lena shut the door calmly. "You can leave the same way you came," she said. It was a line that felt small and final, and it closed the chapter. Months passed, and life kept building forward in small increments. I fixed more houses, met different neighbors, and found satisfaction in the mundane: tightened screws, leveled floors, coffee that tasted right. Lena and I began talking about things that used to feel lofty: travel, a place of our own, perhaps a small renovation project where we could pick tiles together. These weren't grandiose dreams. They were the adult version of fairy tales: practical, paint-splattered, and loving in the ordinary way. One morning, as snow pressed soft against the windows, Lena made coffee and slid a notepad across the table with a scribbled idea for a weekend trip. She watched me as I read it and said, "We can go if you want." Her voice was simple and free of the complicated baggage I'd grown used to. I realized then, not with trumpets or thunder, but with a calm certainty, that I wanted to keep going with her. A life without the constant need to prove itself sounded like a luxury. Sometimes people ask me if I feel revengeful when I tell the story now. The truth, I felt a quiet justice. Not the kind that requires someone's life to be ruined, but the kind where truth makes space for better things. Watching someone you once loved realize they had been trying to buy a life they didn't build and then be left with themselves isn't enjoyable in a mean way. It's simply the natural alignment of consequences and choices. I didn't hold a grudge. I held a boundary. And Lena? She became the person I built things with, not in dramatic declarations, but in countless small decisions. We learned how each other liked their coffee, what music made them think, which neighbor would appreciate a hand with a heavy couch. These things sound trivial, but they are where love accrues, in the repetitive, reliable gestures. I won't pretend I never thought about how different life could have been. I still imagine the life where Marissa and I grew old in the same house, joked about our kids, or argued about paint colors. Those imaginings aren't poison. They're part of what made me human. But I also know now that the life I have is better suited to who I've become. I am not the same man who once accepted explanations at face value. I am a man who learned what quiet respect looks like when given back to him. There was a finality that surprised me. The divorce was signed, the house keys were turned in, and Marissa disappeared from the routine of my days in a way that felt almost merciful. No dramatic scenes, no public shouting matches, just the slow return of ordinary life. People asked if I was angry, bitter, or vindictive. I was none of those things. I was simply relieved. Relief is an underrated emotion. It tastes like clean air after a storm. Lena and I continued building a life that didn't need the theatrics that came before. We planted a small garden and argued, lovingly, about where the tomatoes should go. We went on a weekend trip to the lake, sat in a small rental, and watched fog lift off the water. We cooked together, sometimes disastrously, other times perfectly. Each ordinary moment stitched us closer. The intimacy we developed had the quiet power of people who choose each other consistently, not because of a dramatic moment, but because of a steady accumulation of small, meaningful choices. Sometimes, when I pass by the places where memories with Marissa were made, I feel a flash of sadness, but the sadness is accompanied by a stronger sense of peace. I made a choice to not be a footnote in someone else's story. I chose to be present in my own life, and Lena chose to share that space with me. That decision, simple, steady, mutual, felt like victory, not over anyone, but for the kind of life I wanted to live. The truth about love and loss is that it rarely fits tidy moral lessons. People change, choices are made, and lives rearrange accordingly. If there is a takeaway from my story, it is this: fidelity isn't just a contract you sign, it's a daily practice of showing up. When someone chooses glamour over your presence, the appropriate response isn't vengeance. It's the radical act of choosing yourself back. It sounds small, but the effect is huge. Now, years later, I keep the tool chest I bought before any of this happened. It sits in a corner, still with my fingerprints in the wood. Lena laughs when she sees it, and sometimes she opens a drawer and finds a bit of tape or a forgotten screw. We keep building, not revenge, not monuments, but a soft life made of sturdy things. And sometime when the wind comes through the trees and leaves the porch clean, I realize everything that had to break so something better could be put together again. When people ask how it feels to walk away, I tell them the honest thing. It felt like coming home.